So today I'm gonna show you how to start the self-portrait. And so I've prepped a little bit to get ready for it, and then I'll walk you through the steps. So for that, this is the assignment sheet. It's got these images at the bottom, and again, there's step by step. The steps are pretty similar to the still life. I think both of these give measurements for if you're working by on the 18 by 24 inch paper. So just ignore the measurements if you're working, a little bit smaller. And if you're working 18 by 24, it will make it even easier for you. But I'm gonna do my demo today on the 9 by 12 inch paper and show you how to work with that. So I'm gonna move my camera so you can see a little bit more. So on my easel, I've already taped a new piece of drawing paper and I've toned it. So I went ahead and did that step to save time, but the same process that I did on Tuesday, I taped the edges of my paper. Now, I don't know how good this camera is, but you can see maybe 1/8 of an inch, I overlapped the paper because this is really small and I wanna make sure that if I put too much overlap of the tape, my measurements may distort the proportions. So don't put too much tape, but you want enough to hold it onto the drawing board as you're working. Okay, so I've already toned my paper with the willow charcoal, and now I have my image here, and then I have my worksheet, and then I have all of my charcoal materials that I like to work with. So anytime I work with charcoal, I always have the willow, my kneaded eraser, a piece of the compressed charcoal, my charcoal pencil, a tortillon or the blender, my white charcoal pencil, which is basically white chalk, and then I have my clicky eraser it's a retractable eraser. I call it the clicky eraser, but I have that for erasing like fine details because erasing is drawing just as much as making a black mark. So this will be one of your best friends when you start adding the details to your assignments. I've also got some markers here because I'm going to be using those to draw on top of my image. Okay, so as you see my creepy photo, some of the students call these the serial killer self-portraits because the value is so extreme. But this is what I was talking about. I have a bathroom that doesn't have a window in it. And so I went in there last night with a flashlight and turned off all the lights and took this weird selfie. And my printer, I just printed it out. And you can see I printed it full page because I printed it from my phone. It didn't allow me to print it a little smaller. But I'm actually going to measure just a portion of it. So feel free, as you saw, like with this example here, she cropped her image quite a bit. This student didn't so much, but that's fine. You can work, if you want to work on a smaller area, go back and look at some of the examples. Some students find that easier. So don't feel like you have to put your whole face on there. It can be, more cropped if you would like. So let me see if I can put my, oops. All right, sorry, I'm having some technical difficulties. I just broke the clip on my camera. All right, so this is the printed photo, and I did the math. So my paper is 9 by 12 inches, and so I figured I normally have students just draw like a quadrant on their paper and divide it into 4 pieces and do the same on their drawing paper. But since the printed image and the paper are so similar, I wanted to make sure it would be a little bit more accurate. So the 9 by 12, if you divide each side by 3, that will give you 3 by 4. So I figured if I drew a 3 by 4 inch drawing or area over my photo, and then I divided up the actual drawing paper into 9 shapes, then that will help me enlarge that grid to the drawing paper. And so I have a ruler here, and so my measurement's going to be 3 inches by 4 inches. So it's going to really crop my face quite a bit, but that's okay. That's what makes these kind of fun sometimes, is it's having a little bit of a cropped image. So I'm going to use, I have a like gold Sharpie type marker here that I'm going to use to make marks so I can see them on the photo. So I'm going to just make a mark at 0, and then 3 inches for the top part. And then I'm going to use the ruler and line it up at the top of the paper, and then draw a line straight down. And then I'm going to do this, the other same thing here with the other mark I made. Okay, so that will give me the 3-inch measurement. And then the other part, the other measurement was 4 inches. So I'm going to try to capture most of my face in that measurement. And so I'm going to crop it. Like this. So I'm going to make a mark at 0 and 4 inches. And then line the ruler up at the side of the page and make sure that it's at a right angle. Okay, so if you can see on the screen, this area, this 3 by 4 inch area, is all that I'm going to be drawing. Okay, now to make it easier, I'm going to divide that up into an inch grid, and that will help me enlarge it to my paper. So I'm going to put my ruler over this. I'm starting it on this side at 0, and I'm going to make a mark at 1 inch and 2 inch at the top. And I'm using just a Sharpie pen now because I don't want to put big bold lines over anything that I may have to draw. And then I'm going to put a mark at 1 inch and 2 inch here. And then I'll be able to connect those lines. So if you have, if you print a photo, a selfie from your computer, you can choose to actually print, if you're using 9 by 12 paper, you can choose to print a photo that's 3 by 4 inches, and you could crop it beforehand so you don't have to do all of this. I was just really tired when I finished grading last night, and I didn't feel like getting back on my computer, so I just printed it from my phone, and it printed the whole thing. But I think this crop view might be kind of fun. So now on the vertical side, I'm making a mark every 1 inch as well, at 1 inch, 2 inch, 3 inch. And then I'm going to do the same thing on the left side. Normally, I have the students just create like 4 quadrants, because I think, we are trying to learn to draw. So using a grid, it's a bit of a crutch, but, since I'm not going to be there to help you, with every step along the way. It's okay to use a grid, for this. You're still, you're still drawing it. People have different opinions about using projectors and things like that in their work. And I always just say be honest, with people if they ask you how you made what you made. So usually at this point, you can see now I have it's a 4-3 grid of 1 inch squares on this, and I'm going to have the same thing on my paper, but on the paper it's going to be 3 inch squares. Okay, so what I usually do at this point is I'll fold the image if there's excess information, because otherwise I'll get distracted and I might try to draw that information in my drawing where I don't really see it, if that makes sense. So you can see this is what my drawing will end up looking like, is this little cropped piece of my drawing. So now that I've done that, I'm going to pull my drawing board down here. Let's see if I can. Oh, that works. Whoops. Okay, so hopefully you can see. All right, so on my drawing board, I'm putting it flat to draw the grid. But once you start the actual drawing, you're going to want to do that upright on your easel, or have it in your lap, leaned against a table, so you have it at an appropriate angle. Okay, so let's see. All right, so this is 9 by 12 inches. So I'm going to take my ruler, and at the top of the paper, I'm going to use my willow charcoal. Now, with this step, a lot of times I have students, they get scared and they don't want to trust me, and they will use a Sharpie or their charcoal pencil to make these grid lines. And guess what? They will be there for the rest of your life and then some. So you never want to use anything permanent to make the grid lines on your drawing, because you need those to smudge out. And if you use pencil or the charcoal pencil, and then you have the willow charcoal down, you're not going to be able to get that up. Especially if you put charcoal over pencil, it's you're going to have to erase all the charcoal to then get down to the graphite to erase that. So you don't really ever mix graphite and charcoal together. It's been very rare that I've ever seen anyone use those two media together and it look successful. So I'm kind of lining up the zero from the ruler on where I can see the paper through the tape. That way it'll help keep my proportions a little more accurate. And so since my grid is a 1-inch grid, and then this is 3 times the size of it, that means that my squares on this will be 3 inches. So I'm going to be making a mark at 3 inches with my willow charcoal, and then 6 inches, okay? And then I'm going to just move down closer to the bottom of the paper, and I'm going to make a mark at 3 inches, and then 6 inches again, okay? And then I'll use my ruler to connect those two marks. And then with the willow charcoal, I'm just going to draw a line, and then I'm going to do the same thing over here. So again, remember to tone your paper first, because that will help you with creating the range of values that you see. All right, now the other side is going to be is 12 inches. So I'm going to line up my ruler with that. And then I'm going to make a mark at every 3 inch. So 3 inches, 6 inches, and then 9 inches. I'm going to do the same thing on this side. So at 3 inches, 6 inches, and then 9 inches. And you always want to measure at 2 points. That way it will help your measurements be more accurate. Okay? So I'm going to line up those two marks at the 3-inch mark. Okay, so now I have the same 4x3 grid on my drawing paper that I do on my drawing. Now, I think it will be best if you all work from the easel, but I think because my camera, the clamp just broke on it, so I don't know if it's going to attach back to my computer very well. So I'm going to keep mine flat like this so you can see it a little bit better, but also standing up at a table. So I'm really hovering over the drawing, and by using this smaller grid, I think I'll be able to make sure everything is where it's supposed to be. Now, at this step, I know some of you may not trust me yet, but hopefully looking at the student work and my work, you'll feel like you can. and having drawing two students that have taken me before. But I really encourage you to do the next step upside down. And the reason is because whenever we look at things right side up, we tend to simplify it. And so if you turn your image upside down and then are looking at it, it will help you be more subjective and more objective. I mean, and it will help you get everything in the right place without over simplifying. And of course, you can flip it back over once you get going. But I think to get the initial sketch down, you may want to try this technique. So basically, what you see in each little square, it will be each of these squares. And so that should help you enlarge it. So I usually don't get too caught up in the grid. I will just start doing like a quick gesture. And I always look at, okay, well, this little dip of my lip right here is almost halfway, but not quite halfway. So you can even kind of envision breaking this down more if you find that helpful. So I don't draw any details at first. I usually will just start looking at the bigger shapes because the details will be the last thing that you do. And try not to think of the facial features as um, try not to think of them as facial features as you're drawing, or you're gonna start to want to simplify things. And so try to draw more where you see like the shadows and highlights. And you never want to make things up. So sometimes I'll have students like draw nostrils that aren't there, or add you know more I can't think of what I was trying to say, but more definition for like their cheekbones. Or so don't make anything up. This class, we're primarily going to be working with from observational stuff. All right, so see the bags under my eye come to about halfway there, and my eye touches here. And I'm gonna try to finish up my my assignments I started on Tuesday before next week, just to follow along with you all. But I am taking an online teaching class, and also serving as dean. So I don't know if that will happen, but I'm going to try my best because I always hate starting even demo drawings and not finishing them. Okay, so it's not a lot of information because mine is so cropped. I mean, there are a lot of details, but I'll get that once I get in with the other materials. So once I have this initial sketch done or gesture, so always start with a gesture with most of your drawings, and you're going to end up with a more successful drawing. I promise you. I've had students before with this step that they take literally an hour to do. I just did, or sometimes I've had students take like a whole 3-hour class just doing what I did because they were trying to draw every detail. But this is a preliminary start. Like this is the beginning, so you don't want to draw all the details because you're not even sure if it's in the right place yet. So start with bigger areas, and then you will go back in and do the details last. So this is the part that scares a lot of students. They get scared to erase the grid lines, but don't. I mean, I can see I drew everything pretty much where it should be, and so I really don't need the grid anymore. It's still going to be on my photo, and I'm still going to have the photo to look at. So I can still compare and use my knowledge and my vision to decide if things need to be altered as I move along. So along here, I guess this is my cheek. I see like a really big highlight, so I'm taking my kneaded eraser and I'm going to erase that highlight. So the next step is not to put in darker values, but to erase the lighter values. So that's, again, what we call the reductive or subtractive drawing technique. So I'm going to just erase this whole area. And it doesn't have to be perfect. Again, we're just beginning, and you always want to work from large areas to smaller details. Then right under my eye, there is this highlight in the circles under my eye. And then within the eye, of course, there's like a couple of highlights from the reflected light, but I'm not going to do that yet because that's a small detail, and we don't do those until the end. Okay, so I'm just going to come in. The kneaded eraser is really great because you can actually shape it. So I can use it a little bit I can kind of shape it like clay, and then erase smaller areas if I need to. And then right above the eye, underneath the eyebrow, there's kind of a highlight here and here. And if you're wondering about, well, are we not going to learn ideal proportions? We will. We'll do that towards the end of the class. I just want to show you, after doing those practice exercises and focusing on value, you can really draw anything without having to learn that. But we will learn it as well at the end, because there are some things that are helpful to know when drawing figures. But I wanted you to see, like, once you learn to see, you can draw literally anything. So all this area is dark, and then on the bottom of my nose, I had a light underneath me, and the bottom of the nose is actually illuminated. And I know some of you may feel kind of strange about doing a self-portrait, but that's how, whenever we draw other people, and we don't know how to draw completely yet, it can hurt people's feelings when it doesn't look like them. And I don't want you all to get in trouble with your quarantine buddies about how you draw them, because I know when I was younger and I was learning to draw people, I have younger siblings, and I'm like 10 to 13 years older than them, and they were my models. And when I was in high school and my first in college, I would babysit them a lot and would draw them, and they loved it because they were kids. But when I look back, I'm like, oh my gosh, I hope I didn't give them any body image issues with the way that I drew them, because I was not the best at that time. So self-portraits are kind of commonly known for helping you get over your fear, getting more comfortable with the subject matter. But also, throughout history, artists have created self-portraits, and it's always nice to just kind of see their personality come out through their expression and all that. So next, you can come in, if you want to get darker. I've erased most of the highlights. You can come in with the willow charcoal, but remember, your paper will only hold so much willow charcoal, so I wouldn't go overboard with the willow charcoal. It's just going to wipe off. Another thing, I have OCD, like clinically, my doctor, I even take medicine for anxiety because that's part of it, but I want to wash my hands all the time. And being an artist, that's kind of strange because I want to wash my hands constantly when I'm making art, even though I'm going to be messy. But you really, whenever you're working with charcoal, try to avoid washing your hands, because if you have a clean finger, and you put it on your paper, you'll see it's going to lift up the material. Whereas if you have a finger that already has charcoal on it, it's not going to do anything. And so it's really best to kind of keep your fingers dirty, because it won't mess with your drawing as much. And it's hard because I just, like right now, I just want to wash my hands, but then I want to get them messy again too. So it's like a constant struggle sometimes with that for me. So I'm going to go ahead and take my compressed charcoal, and where I see like really dark values, I'm going to come in and use that. I'm just going to use the side of it to put some of the compressed charcoal down. And it will erase too, so don't worry about what if I can't erase that? Or you'll be able to erase it. So you can see here, this is where my mustache and beard was, and there's quite a bit of texture there, but mostly it's dark. So I'm just gonna go ahead and shade that area because there is a lot of texture. I'm gonna shade it all the kind of base color, the darker area, and then I'll erase those lighter details because that will actually help make it look more real. And I'm going to show you how to do that in just a moment. And then this was the area underneath my upper lip. And then you're supposed to use the tortillon to blend the charcoal, but I really don't like to use those. I prefer to use my fingers. Now our hands do have natural oils and acid that come out of them, but my hands tend to be really dry, so I'm going to just use my fingers. My drawings will still last a while, but you may have teachers that tell you not to use your fingers, but I prefer to do it. I feel like I'm in more control using my finger versus the blending tool. So I'm just going to blend the charcoal out, because what that does is if you just put it on the surface, it's really not worked into the paper very much, and it may not really look like deep, dark, black space. So you may have to, layer more of it on there to get it to look more realistic. But I wanted you to see also that the paper can really hold so much charcoal. And I usually use the softer charcoal, the softer compressed charcoal, because I find that it blends easier. And then I use the harder one for more of the details. And I know in my eye I can see it's mostly black. I'll add the highlights at the end. So this is where I see students make stuff up. So I can see some little eyelashes in my image, but not a lot of them. So draw what you see. Don't come in and, oh, I need to give myself better eyelashes, because that's going to make it look unnatural. So we want to try to keep it looking as natural as possible. So try to draw what you see as much as possible. And you can see, I don't know how long we've been in this session exactly, but it hasn't been that long, and I've already made like such progress with this that all that's really left is the details, like the smaller details. So I wanted you to see, by working with the gesture, by toning your paper, and doing some of these steps, it's important to spend time invested in your work, but there's also ways that you can work faster, and you're never guaranteed more time. So I know I have a lot of friends that we have kind of different views on art. Some of my friends will spend years on, one thing, just at a slow pace, but I'm always like, well, I don't know when I'm going to have time to do this again, so I'd rather just finish it now as best as I can, and then move on to the next thing and make that thing even better. So it's kind of up to you how you want to, look at that. Okay, so I know that it's not perfect, but I think I have most of the general highlights and shadows where they're supposed to be. So I was just going to hold it up and let you see that it's kind of looking like a face, right? And so you can see just after just a few minutes, it's already, you're starting to see that three-dimensional effect from using the value. So now if I wanted to flip it over and start working on the details closer, I can. You may notice some of your angles may not quite be accurate. maybe I got too dark in certain areas. So that's when you can start coming in and cleaning up those sorts of things. So I'm going to just keep going back and forth between the two. That's when I also tend to come in and start using this clicky eraser. And I'll kind of do section by section. And then for if you're worried about like resting your hand on your drawing and it's smudging, sometimes I'll just take like another piece of paper to rest my hand on. And then that way I know it's not smudging the work that I was doing earlier. So now with this little small eraser, I can come in and start to define edges. And just clean up some of the values. Use this, actually gets much darker up here. So by doing it upside down and by working with the toned paper, I think it'll just get you started a lot faster and yield better results in your finished drawing. And then if your eyes get tired from looking at it and you can't tell like if it's looking the right way or not, always take a break, turn it upside down again, whatever you need to do, and that will help you out, I promise. So these highlights, I know it's not super bright like in my image. Whenever I'm completely done, I can go back and add those in with my white chalk, but don't do it until the very end because you want to make sure it doesn't blend with the charcoal if you still need to do some blending. All right, and then along the bottom lid, I do see a little bit of shadow here, and then I see some eyelashes along the edge. Again, don't simplify them too much. If they look irregular and there's just a few, try to capture the shape so that it doesn't look fake or cartoon-like. There's nothing wrong with cartoons, but you know the viewer, like in this class, we're focusing on observation. So having an abstracted version of your face and a style isn't really meeting the requirements of the assignment. So you want to try not to simplify it and let the viewer know that what you were going for. Because sometimes if stuff is too much in between, you can't tell if it's on purpose because it's like the artistic freedom, or if it's because they didn't know how to do it. So you can see the charcoal pencil and the little retractable eraser. Both are really helpful once you start working on those super fine details. And this is where my right brain just starts going. And once your right brain is engaged, it's really hard to talk. And so, because your left brain is the one that forms words and all that stuff, so it's kind of hard to talk. But once I get to this point, I just want to be like, bye, see y'all later, and just draw the rest of the day because it gets a little addicting wanting to make everything look the same. And I don't know, to me, charcoal is just so much fun because you can just push it around, erase it. It's so forgiving, even though it is, quite messy. So you can see there's some more areas I see some kind of cast shadows of my eyelashes up above my eye that I can add in. But hopefully you can see that it's really starting to come together in just a few minutes. So again, it doesn't have to take a long time to make a finished drawing. And 18 by 24, it goes just as fast. Like sometimes I'm even faster when I work larger because I'm not as worried about accuracy because I have so much more space to work in. So what I'm doing now is on the cheek and the cheekbone here, I see a lot of mid values. So I'm blending the willow charcoal and the compressed charcoal where I need to create that same illusion that I see in the photo. And then the side of my nose is actually pretty, there's a strong edge here where then it kind of fades on the side. So I want to make sure that I capture that because since mine is so cropped, every little detail needs to be as accurate as possible to create that illusion. And a lot of students don't like to draw noses, and I'm not sure why. To me, they're really fun to draw, but just draw what you see. You know, not everybody has the same nose, and you know, so just look at your nose and see how it compares. You know, just draw what you see there, and you don't have to draw anything else that's not there. So for mine, it's just like this big highlight, and then just a little indication of a nostril on this side. Okay, so I'll come back and work on that some more. Now, one thing I wanted to show you is how to do texture. And so on this area of where my mustache is and part of my beard over here, I wanted to show you how to approach that. So whenever we draw hair, and this goes for eyebrows, hair on our head, anything that has like a coarse texture like that, you want to, let me bring this closer so you can see a little bit better. So do you see how it's, well, kind of coming together? And so with the texture on the hair and things like that, you always want to look at areas where you see like lighter values and darker values and treat that as one big shape. So in the mustache, I see that there are lighter areas towards the bottom. So I'm just going to come in with my kneaded eraser and kind of, whoops, sorry about that. I'll hopefully have this all figured out by the end of the 5 week class, but it is kind of hard to do this with a camera sitting here. So I see down here it's lighter, like in the image. So you want to erase the lighter areas and then leave the darker areas. And then in the areas that are lighter, you can come back in with your charcoal pencil to add the darker lines that you see. So I had drawn like a kind of harsh line here that wasn't really here, but it's more soft because of the hair that's coming down. So now I can come back in with my charcoal pencil and I can layer in those kind of marks that I see. Try not to draw too much of a pattern, because if you draw like same, exact precise lines, then it's gonna look, again, it will look kind of cartoony. And so you wanna make sure that it's looking very 3D. And then up here, I do see kind of some areas that sort of have some highlights. I think where I'm getting some gray in my beard. And then for the highlights, you can use your little retractable eraser and come in and do the same thing. So even up here in areas where I see that it's mostly dark, I still will see a little bit of a highlight along certain areas. So this will help me create the illusion of what we call implied texture. which means it's not really there, but we're going to make it look like it is, like we see with photography, right? Because photography is flat, but it looks like the thing because it captures the value and everything precisely. So that's what we're trying to do with our drawings. So the more that I do this, I'll probably spend more time on this area than any other part of the drawing. The more I keep layering in those highlights and shadows and all that, it's going to really make this start to look like the texture of hair. So that was one thing I was going to talk about with you is drawing hair is don't draw, the face and then draw lines because our hair rarely ever looks just like lines. We want to treat it as like one big shape, then erase the highlights and shadows in the bigger areas, and then go in and put those little fine details of certain things. And I think I showed you a couple of drawings in the PowerPoint that they're zoomed in. You could really see the close detail of the hair. And then some people, I mean, they'll really go in and kind of define these areas even more, creating almost like drawing each hair. I don't have the patience for that, so I usually I'll kind of go in and try to recreate it as much as possible and then move on to the next thing. But if you really want to get into, I don't count each little hair or anything like that. I'm not looking to be, the next Chuck Close or hyper realist painter or artist. So, but if that's what you're into and you want to spend that much time on it, you definitely can. But you can see it's already starting to look like the texture of hair, and then you can see the other parts, how the image is comparing to the rest of the drawing. And it didn't take too terribly long. Now I'm gonna move this up to my easel. And then I wanted to show you a quick little diagram about drawing some other facial features to just help you out with for in case your images include some of these things. So where did I lost my willow charcoal.
Hi, this is Vicki Ferguson. Do you have examples of how to do this on the opposite on black paper?
Yeah, I can show you. I think in the PowerPoint there's a couple that are on black paper, but I can do. I'll do a little demo and show you how to do that too.
And,
So
and what would be the best quality black paper to use? Because when I'm looking, I'm finding mostly construction type paper. I'm not finding a lot of drawing.
yeah, there's the brand that I like to use is called Canson Mi Tienes drawing paper. Let me see what it's called. There's a color. It's called Midnight Murano, I think is what the official name of it is. That's a nice black drawing paper. But this Strathmore brand, they have this grayscale drawing paper that you can get a pad of it. I think I got this on Amazon, and it's got the white, like an off-white, gray, and then black paper in it. You can see this is like the medium gray color, and then the black paper. You see how it's like super textured. Like this is actually drawing paper, and it usually says for dry media. And so I think it's pretty much the same as this paper. But I did a demo on Tuesday showing like working on the still life with those, and I'll finish those up. Whenever you're done with the drawing, though, usually you can't tell whether it's on black paper or white paper or gray paper if it's done really well. So sometimes you have to flip it on the back to see it. But give me a minute and I'll show you how to do some things on that as well up close. So
Great.
For the hair, I just wanted to show you like again, like just say this was someone's hair right here. So let's say the paper was toned, and then we were to draw, let's say some the shape of the person's hair, and maybe it's kind of wavy hair or whatever. So just like we did with well, like I did with the mustache that I was just drawing, the same thing here. If I saw highlights in parts of the hair, I could erase them with the kneaded eraser and get those kind of general areas of highlight, and maybe there's some darker areas within the hair that I can put in the compressed charcoal. And then come in with the retractable eraser, and that's when I could put in like some of the highlights that I may see. Sometimes you'll even see some highlights or flyaways like in darker parts of the hair. So then you could put in the highlights. This is kind of starting to look like a braid. And then, of course, the darker strands too with the charcoal pencil. And if this was like braided hair, it would probably get darker where the hair is going into the next braid. So you could layer in more lines to create that illusion of value and form, but also the texture and the highlights. So you can see from a distance, do you see how that's looking more like hair? So we just, whatever you do, you don't want to, draw a person and then just start drawing hair like this. That doesn't ever look good. So don't do that. Like look at it as like a big shape and then the details and stuff inside. And then the other thing I was going to talk about is mouth, drawing people's mouths. If your selfie is smiling, you're going to have to draw the teeth. And so if you don't want to draw the teeth, then don't smile in your photo. But whenever we draw mouths, a lot of times, people will want to simplify it, and they'll draw, some big lips, and then they'll want to draw, each tooth like they're in a row, side by side, and that's not really a good look to have, and it doesn't look realistic. Plus, when we draw a black line between each tooth, that actually communicates that there's a gap between each tooth. And we're all uniquely beautiful in our own ways, but our teeth are usually closer together, and you don't always see like a black line defining each shape. So what I wanted to show you is try not to draw that, because we're trying to purge the lines out of our drawings. So instead, let me just tone an area of the paper here. So let's say that I'm drawing someone's mouth and they're kind of smiling. So what I usually do is I draw like the shape of their teeth. And you have to also realize that the teeth are curved, and we'll talk more about that going on. But really, our teeth are kind of like the shape of a soda can. It wraps around. So think of it like that, as our teeth going back. And then usually we see, part of the bottom lip as well. So what I tend to do is I will go in with my little small eraser, and I will erase the area of the teeth. So let's say I'll treat it just as like one big shape. And then maybe put some highlights in the upper lip. Usually there's kind of a highlight on the upper part of the lip, and then on the bottom lip as well. It just depends on the lighting. And we'll cover that more when we get to the unit over anatomy. I keep blowing this charcoal everywhere, and I realize I'm not at school, and I'm going to have to clean all this charcoal up that I'm blowing all over my studio. So now you can see I have this sort of plane of this curved plane of the teeth. And so what I do, instead of drawing a line between each tooth is I'll kind of go along and draw the contour of the person's teeth, because usually you see the bottom of their teeth, and I'll shape them that way. And then along the top of the upper lip, I'll also kind of indicate if I'm able to see. It just depends on the person's smile, but sometimes you'll be able to see part of the gum coming down, which will also kind of create an implied line, making it seem like that there's teeth there. And then if there is if it's super up close and you actually do see a line, you can take your tortillon instead of your charcoal pencil, because it's going to be lighter, and you can come in and start to maybe add some lighter gray values to it without having like a harsh black line between each tooth. So do you see how that looks so much better than drawing like each tooth like that? So hopefully that will help you as you're working. And remember, erasing is just as powerful as drawing, so you can always take it off if it doesn't look good. All right, so hopefully that helps you with the textures. And then let me grab. And this is another black pad of paper that I got, and it's good for like most drawing materials. I think I got this on Amazon, and I've been drawing in it mostly using different markers and different tools in it, but it works pretty good. And I've used some charcoal and chalk on it before, but it works really well with like gel pens. But there are some pads of, I think I got two, I think it was like 2 pads for under $10, but it was black drawing paper on Amazon. It says U.S. Art Supply. I don't remember the brand, but it's 64-pound paper. It's pretty good. But it says for gel pens, metallic pens, oil pastels, and more, and it's acid free. So I have a piece of the black drawing paper here, and for it, you want to use your white chalk or Conte, and you can sketch out. I usually will just lightly, sketch out, let's say that this is like some hair that we're going to do. So I usually will sketch it out first with the white chalk, and then it's just working backwards. So wherever it's a highlight, you'll be putting that in, and you can blend this too. This paper is super textured, and this is Conte, so it's got a little bit of wax in it, so it doesn't blend as easy. Let me use the white charcoal pencil. So this one's a little softer, so you can see I can blend it a little bit more to get the different values. So you just have to think backwards, and you have to realize whenever you erase on the black paper, it's actually going to get darker. And so if I were to come back in, if I needed to add black highlights and black darker strands in this, I would have to come back in with my smaller eraser and erase those in instead of drawing those in. But I always tell students too, just because it's black paper, that doesn't mean you can't use your charcoal still on it. So if it's hard for you to, sometimes the black paper will have sort of a different temperature to it, if that's the best way to describe it. So sometimes I will still rub a little charcoal on top of it to get like really deep, rich shadows if needed. And once you spray it all, you can't really tell as much. So you just have to really, I feel like with the black paper, you have to just start playing around with it. But does that help a little bit? Hopefully, and you can do the same thing. You can layer the black over the white, or if you needed to use a charcoal pencil, if you didn't have like the super small quickie eraser, you could use the charcoal pencil over the white chalk to get like super fine details if you needed to. So once you create the range of value, the paper, you're not going to really be able to tell whether you use black paper or what color paper that you started with. And then with the gray paper, or a tan paper, what's unique about those is, you can use both materials. So if you were to, let's say, draw like a braid or something, you could put both the charcoal and then the white chalk and layer them both on top, and then you have that middle gray. So some people like to work with the gray paper because you kind of are starting with that middle value, so it kind of helps you. It's like starting with the tone paper, but that